AJ, does a 5-year-old have unhealed emotion when, like us as parents have... If my child is triggering me and I have looked at the emotion and the child's behaviour does or doesn't change, does that 5-year-old have unhealed emotion, or is it completely, we change everything automatically shifts in that child?
Yes, the child does have unhealed emotion. Of course, there is emotion that enters the child that can't exit the child because of our previous damage that we've done to the child. So, of course, a child of 5 years of age does have unhealed emotional injury. The problem that they have, though, is that it will automatically flow out of them when we release the blockage to that emotion inside of ourselves. So it's very rare for a child to retain a blockage inside of themselves if we act in love and in truth towards our child. And that's where I've used the example where when we were travelling, remember, and we were in a car with a group of people, and all I did is I just suggested to the parents, don't do the addictive behaviour anymore, the parents' addictive behaviour anymore. And as soon as the parents stopped their addictive behaviour, the child started going into a tantrum. Now that's unhealed emotion in the child. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily tears, it could be any emotion they start to display.
That's right, yeah. So this child went into a tantrum for an hour and a half. So that was all effect-based tantrum. It wasn't. It was just stuff where anger, where they've always been able to use anger to control mummy before, and it's always worked, right? And so they go into a tantrum, and soon enough they're going to get mum's attention and approval through this process. Now the mum wanted to give that, but then realised that no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay up the front and allow this to continue. And for an hour and a half, he yelled, screamed, threw things. Eventually, exhausted the throwing, of course, because there was nothing around him to throw anymore. But, he yelled, screamed, threw things. And after an hour and a half, he actually got into his grief. And that was the causal emotion, the grief about, how he felt unloved as a male because of mum's projections about men that he's received from the moment he was conceived, right? So he started releasing this grief that he had, which took about 20 minutes, that's all. And when he finished crying, he turned into this ultra-loving person immediately, right? So an hour and a half of terrifying emotions, and then 20 minutes of a causal emotion, and then the release was there, and you could feel the release there. Unfortunately, because mum didn't heal her damage towards men, the next day she's still projecting anger at men, which he's now receiving as a new projection. So obviously he's now going to get angry again about the whole thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And this is why it's very important to understand that, yes, our children do have unhealed emotion, but we need to firstly focus on ourselves as parents, and when we do that, we'll know how to help our child through the unhealed emotion.
So if my child is still acting out that behaviour, I still have to look at me and not address them until I've finished looking at me?
No, I feel address both things concurrently.
For example, gunplay, continuing to play with guns, continuing to want to eat meat.
Okay,
is that me or him?
Well, that's you, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Let's look at the gunplay, all right? So he's obviously, he's normally a peaceful person, but he loves guns, right? And he loves shooting things and making out he's shooting things and all these other things, right? So there's something he's triggering in you. I think he's even told you what it is, hasn't he?
He might have.
He's pretty intuitive. I think he's already told you what mummy's emotion is about when he gets upset when he wants to kill things.
Yeah, he might have. I can't remember.
Do you remember that you sent me an email once of you told me that he had a spirit with him.
Yes.
He told you, Mummy, I've got a spirit with me, and he liked playing with guns, but when you dealt with that emotion, he didn't want to play with guns anymore.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
So a lot of times our children are acting out, through some attractions with the spirit world as well, are acting out some unhealed emotion that we have. So you have a deep fear of violence towards your person.
Yes.
Do you not?
Yes.
And you know that's not yet released.
Yes.
That's the emotion you need to start going into. And when you start going into that emotion, he won't feel drawn to violence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's related to the self-attack thing, the attack from others as well, isn't it? It's all linked in together.
That's right, because you're so afraid of having violent attacks towards yourself, and obviously you know that's related to your own childhood. And so you can see the relationship there. When you heal that emotion, and remember, if you think of your own childhood, this is about a man as well, isn't it?
Do I really have to?
Well, yes, you do have to go there at some point, right? If you want to heal the emotion. And when you heal that emotion, what will happen is that he will stop acting out that violence, because all he's doing is triggering you with it, basically. So this is a beautiful, remember parents, this is a beautiful thing that happens between you and your children. You can rapidly get into causal emotion this way. It's really, really good. And honestly, if you allow yourself to get into causal emotion this way, what will happen very rapidly is you'll work through things probably a lot more rapidly than the average person who doesn't have children around them will work through their emotions. So that's a real blessing and benefit to you in that situation.